Hello friends, today I want to introduce you to an island with no more than 50 people living on it. This is Pitcairn Island. The population of our planet is almost 8 billion people, but there are still places on Earth where you can enjoy solitude. One of them is the Pitcairn Islands in the Pacific Ocean, where no more than 50 people, descendants of the rebels from the world-famous British ship Bounty, live permanently. Pitcairn Islands, the only British overseas territory in the Pacific Ocean, in relative proximity to them Tahiti and the distance to him about 2,200 kilometers. For example, about the same distance should be overcome to get from Moscow to German Munich. The four-island British High Commissioner, who lives in New Zealand, is in charge of the territory, but to visit him it is necessary to undertake a journey of nearly 5,300 kilometers. Therefore, the actual management lies with the Island Council and the Mary of Pitcairn, which makes this corner the smallest democracy in the world. But, however, democracy has not always been here. Of the four islands, only one is inhabited, which is called Pitcairn. The only settlement located there is Adamstown. It is quite logical that it plays the role of the capital, and it is considered the smallest capital in the world. The settlement cannot boast a large number of people. As of 2021, there are only 47 people. Because of this, the island has won the status of the most sparsely populated territory of our planet. The real history of the islands is cooler than any fiction. Not surprisingly, the most interesting part, the mutiny on the ship Bounty, has repeatedly attracted the attention of writers and filmmakers. In the late 1780s, the British Empire decided to send an expedition for breadfruit trees. They were hoped for as a source of cheap caloric food for the slaves on the plantations. A small ship, the Bounty, was chosen for the voyage with a crew of 49 men. In 1788, the crew arrived in Tahiti, where they were to stockpile breadfruit seedlings. The British spent about 5 months on the island, and it is only natural that during this time some of the crew made friends and became lovers with the locals. Shortly after leaving Tahiti, a mutiny broke out on the ship, led by Fletcher Christian, the captain's mate. Its causes are still debated, among them the cruelty of Captain Bligh. Another probable reason the British were too much in love with the beautiful Tahitian women. In addition, it should be understood that the trip was quite a long ship, places not too much. That is, people are just tired of each other. And here is life on the Paradise Islands with charming and easily accessible girls. Anyway, the people revolted, put the captain and 18 other men loyal to him in a rowboat and sent them on their way. Eventually it took the captain and his companions 48 days to reach Timor, where the Dutch colony was. Only 12 men later returned to England, one of them killed in a skirmish with the natives, others from starvation and disease, Captain William Bligh himself also surviving the journey. But back to the rebels. After the captain landed, some of the mutineers settled in Tahiti, where they were eventually caught by British justice, while others were smarter and, after months of searching, settled on a distant island. On January 23, 1790, the Bounty, with its 9 crew members, came ashore on Pitcairn Island with 6 Tahitian men, 11 Tahitian women and 1 girl. The ship was burned to get rid of the evidence and forever discouraged from sailing off the island. Life on the island was not sweet, and soon conflicts between Tahitian men and rebels over women became more frequent. Women began to give birth very early, whether married or illegitimate. The population of the island grew rapidly, but by 1808, when the colony on Pitcairn Island was discovered by an American fishing ship, the composition of the population was quite curious. There were 8 women, 1 man, namely John Adams, and 25 children on Pitcairn, including 24 children of mixed descent and 1 girl, a purebred Tahitian. How it came to be that there was one man left is not reliably known. There are several versions. According to one of them, some of the sailors were killed by Tahitian men, but the women surprisingly sided with the Europeans and helped to destroy their male compatriots. Only 4 Englishmen and 10 women with children remained, but the 4 men could not get along either. One of the sailors, William McCoy, had learned to make moonshine from a native plant, and the stronger sex quite predictably stuck to the bottle. During the conflict, John Adamstown and Edward Young murdered Matthew Quintal. McCoy himself soon allegedly drowned. The 2 were left, but Young soon died of asthma, having previously taught his illiterate friend to read and write. Thus John Adams, after whom the island's capital, Adamstown, is named, was the only man left. He was eventually pardoned by the British authorities and ran the community until his death in 1829. He wasted no time and taught the children to read and write from the only book they had, the Bible, which is still in the island museum. After Adams died, the place of head of the island became vacant, and in 1832 an American adventurer, Joshua Hill, fascinated by the history of the rebels, arrived on Pitcairn. He took power by deception, saying he had been sent by the British government. Pitcairn, however, had no status at the time, that is, it was not yet considered a British colony. Hill imposed rather harsh orders, including a ban on the manufacture of liquor, corporal punishment, and imprisonment. It was a time of dictatorship, but 5 years later, he was exposed and overthrown, then kicked off the island. Power again passed to the locals. In 1838, the island officially became a British colony. Democracy was instituted on the island, and even women were given the right to vote. In 1886, an American Seventh-day Adventist layman, John Thew, came to the island to preach. Eventually, in 1890, all the inhabitants embraced Thew's faith, abandoning Anglicanism. To this day, Adventism is the only religion on Pitcairn, although not many locals attend church. In the 1910s, there was a significant event in world history that greatly affected the island and its inhabitants. It was the opening of the Panama Canal, and because of this, Pitcairn was regularly visited by ships as it was en route to New Zealand. The historical maximum of 233 inhabitants was reached in 1937, after which it has gradually declined, and in the last few decades is about 50 people. The main reason for the population decline has been the immigration of young people, mainly to New Zealand. An aging population is a significant problem, so Pitcairn government has taken measures aimed at making the island more attractive to immigrants, but, however, it does not help much. Mid-20th century life on the islands went on as usual. They were only remembered when the Bounty Mutiny movies were released. One of them came out in 1984, starring Mel Gibson. The next wave of popularity rose in the early '90s, when the world's major newspapers began to write about the island, and these articles were scandalous. The occasion for them served as a high-profile trial in which 7 men from Pitcairn, that is almost half the male population of the island, accused of having sexual relations with underage girls. Among others in the dock was the mayor and his son. The news shocked many, as 55 charges of sexual offenses against children were filed. However, some locals were not that surprised or angry. They said that sex with minors is not considered something abnormal in the island's culture, and that almost all women began their sex life at the age of 12, 14. But this clearly was not satisfactory to everyone, especially Pitcairn police officer Gail Cox, who temporarily worked on Pitcairn, was the one who began uncovering allegations of sexual abuse and started the high-profile case. In addition, the islanders islanders insisted that British law did not apply to them and that if they took the men away, life on the island would be virtually paralyzed. Their arguments did not work, and in the end only one of the defendants was found not guilty. In general, there were two trials, one against those who were living on the island at the time, and the second trial against those who had managed to leave. There were 6 more such people, but the sentences were not harsh, and after a couple of years, all the convicts were released. In order to conduct the trial, 3 judges, several prosecution and defense lawyers and other court staff came to the island from New Zealand. Their arrival doubled the number of people on the island while they were there. As of April 2006, the cost of the trial was about $10 million, a fabulous amount of money for the Pitcairn Islands, and in my opinion, for any court case. More than 15 years have passed since that difficult time for the islanders, and as mentioned above, today the locals on the island are 1 or 2 in number and they try to live amicably. They even have a law against gossip. Those who are seen doing so will be fined 50 New Zealand dollars. Residents of Adamstown take care of the village, keeping order in the streets and public places. Together they not only work, but also relax. The traditional entertainment on the holidays, a trip in a large motorboat to go fishing, after which all participants clean and cook the catch, and then have dinner in the square. At the same time, the birthdays of all the islanders are equated to national holidays. The feast is not accompanied by alcoholic libations, which their ancestors abused. Although alcohol is available in the settlement, in particular it can be tasted at the bar. On Pitcairn there is an apiary. The honey made by island bees is considered one of the best in the world. Even the British Queen herself is fond of it. There is also a storehouse, library, church and small school, post office, police station, health center and museum on the island. Pitcairn's official currency, the New Zealand dollar, but locals are happy to accept the American as well. The local school has only a few students, with a new teacher from New Zealand replacing the previous one each year. The school is primary, and from the age of 13, children go to boarding school in New Zealand. Despite the remoteness from the mainland relative isolation, the island manages to maintain and low food prices. The fact is that they are brought in from New Zealand without paying duty. In general, this whole story gives the impression that New Zealand is somewhere nearby, but let me remind you that it is over 500 kilometers away. Besides, there is no shortage of fruits and vegetables, which are grown locally. Islanders even share supplies with yachtsmen who buy whole boxes. The island's creek dried up a long time ago, and people collect rainwater in various containers. All have running water and electricity. The latter is generated by a generator that is turned off at night. The islanders prefer to travel around Pitcairn on ATVs, as well as a couple of cars and mopeds, a tractor and an excavator. Communication with each other locals maintained mainly by walkie-talkies. In fact, they replace a cell phone, but there is satellite internet and television on the island. True, they have to pay quite a high price, $100 to $200 a month. On Pitcairn there are de facto 2 official languages. The first is English, the second Pitcairn. It was invented by the islanders themselves when they settled the island. It is a mixture of 18th century English and elements of Tahitian. The reason for its appearance is simple. The bounty rebels barely spoke Tahitian. Their exotic friends hardly knew any English. To communicate more or less normally, they created their own language. The main income of the Pitcairn Islands is the sale of collectible postage stamps, honey and handicrafts produced on the island to passing ships whose course is from Great Britain to New Zealand through the Panama Canal. The trade is complicated by the island's rugged topography and lack of a port, so all traders use barges to reach passing ships. Before the coronavirus, Pitcairn was occasionally visited by tourists to whom the locals even rented houses or rooms. Above all, they came to admire the local nature, experiencing a minimum of human impact. It is best enjoyed on the 3 uninhabited islands, Henderson, Eno, and Ducie. However, Pitcairn and its steep cliffs are also a good option. Getting to the islands is not easy. It is without exaggeration one of the most inaccessible areas on the planet. First, there is no airport on Pitcairn, and second, the only permanent vessel MV Claymore 2, contracted by the government to make only 4 trips a year. This is the main, if not the only, way to get cargo to Pitcairn. A simpler way, if I may say so, involves a flight to Tahiti. From Tahiti once a week you fly to Adamstown, and from there on a yacht or ship. Pacific expeditions for $1,900 have to go 36 hours by sea to the island of Pitcairn. But also one option is a cruise ship passing by, but first of all you need to find one, and secondly they usually do not disembark tourists on the island, but only limited to a circle around the islands and a small lecture. There are other options to get to Pitcairn, but as I am sure you have realized, it is very expensive and time-consuming, so only a few people are likely to go there. Those who live in big cities may think that Pitcairn Island is a rather dreary place, which is more suitable for short-term visits. In reality, it's not so bad. It has everything you need to live. If you like solitude, prefer the natural beauty of the stone jungle, and are willing to become part of a small community, then Pitcairn is not the worst option. In addition, outsiders here are ready to take with open arms, need only make a $30,000 deposit and in 2 years to have time to build a house on the allotted plot of land, but for some reason, not very many people willing. Friends, at this point, be sure to share the video if you finish watching it to the end. See you in the next video.